welcome to the Tuesday, January 2nd, 2024 Pembroke School Committee meeting, the first meeting of our year. I'm calling this meeting to order at 6 o'clock, exactly. I'd like to welcome PAC 105, who's here with us today, and they are going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good job, guys.
Thank you. Great job,
Thank you very much.
Good job. Could we start the meeting with everybody?
All right, well, Kim says the meeting is starting now, so be it. Thanks, guys. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Guys,
So if anybody has any public comment, we should have a sign-in sheet somewhere. Feel free to, do we?
Yeah, it's the second row.
Second row over here. If you're at home, you can email scinfo@pembrokek12.org. We're welcoming all the visitors. Welcome to PAC 105. We're glad you are here. And are there any adjustments to the agenda?
No adjustments.
All right. Communications. The warrants are being circulated. So, consideration for approval, school committee meeting minutes of November 7th, November 28th, and December 12th. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
second.
All right, well, one of you. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and it's unanimous. 1, 2, need this. Okay, next on the agenda, the superintendent's report.
Sure. So in your packet, you have a copy of the community engagement survey that Principal Banbury talked about with you all when he was here doing his school improvement plan. So anytime we are going to send a survey out to parents, it needs school committee approval first. The questions are pretty basic. I wasn't sure if there was anything you thought would be helpful for him to add or take away. But it's just to get an idea of, how the school fits into the community here at North Pembroke and take some good, honest feedback and make some improvements in the future.
All right.
No, nothing else. This is the whole.
That's it, yeah. We like to keep it short, Patrick.
No, I like
People
it.
are
How's
more
it
apt to
being
fill it out.
sent out? Like, we'll, how do you guys?
So they would use the email list that we have for North Pembroke as well as their Facebook pages. Originally, we had talked about doing a QR code at the conferences, but those have passed. But we can do it again in the spring too when people are here for parent-teacher conferences. So.
Any other questions?
So do we need to approve it?
You do need to approve it.
Oh, we do, okay.
And so move to approve the North Pembroke Elementary School Community Engagement Survey as
Second.
presented.
Sorry, second.
It's been seconded, and any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And it's unanimous.
Somewhere in your ginormous packet, I think you have some winter sports participation numbers that Brian has shared. Can't find them quickly off the top of the packet, but they were in the electronic version that went out. So we have 286 winter athletes this year at the high school. That is an increase over last year by 8 athletes. So we do have our percentage of athletes, of students participating in winter athletics is 2% higher than it has been in the past. So 41% of the high school enrollment is engaged in winter athletics. The previous years it has been 38, 36, and 31%. So
That's great.
I just want to say the track kids were killing it from what I saw.
Yeah, I think the girls hockey team had a great weekend with the Gormley tournament. I think the boys fared pretty well in basketball. The girls too. I saw some some, it's not Twitter anymore, what is it, X photos posted over the weekend, so.
Are we gonna have a couple of the teams in?
Yep, so the plan is to invite boys soccer in to the next meeting, and
That's great.
there's another one that I just can't think of off the top of my head that we have. The
Sure.
cross-country
Cross-country.
students that participate in the state relay.
That's awesome. Both teams did a lot for the town, so I mean, it's good.
If you could see your numbers, you can see that wrestling has made a resurgence at Pembroke High School. We have 28 wrestlers, which is great. There have been years in the past where we've had a great group of students engaged in wrestling, but weren't able to win any meets because we didn't have enough weight classifications covered, but that is no longer the case. So 28, which is up from 16 last year, so that's a big increase for us in that. So,
I don't think we have a copy of it, but maybe just email it after. the
yeah,
fact.
I think it might have been in your electronic version, but.
Yeah.
Aaron, how are we for just equipment? You know, I mean, I know a lot of times that's all on, it used to be on a rotating
Yep, so
schedule. I
it's.
mean, are we up to date? Is
We are
the
up to
equipment
date, so
current?
we do have a uniform replacement cycle. Brian stays on top of that. As far as consumables, for lack of a better word, those are ordered for each season. Larger purchases like wrestling mats and that type of stuff have all been figured into to the 5-year purchasing plan, so.
I'm just gonna give a little bit of a plug for the programs, but these programs change kids' lives. I mean, we've always had I think, sitting around this table through multiple different committees, we've always had a philosophy about educating the whole child, right? And that means a lot of things, right? It's about what happens in the classroom, it's about what happens in clubs, it's about what happens in sports, but our program has changed lives for kids, right? Both from a scholarship perspective and a scholarship opportunity perspective, but also in a leadership, a growth, a teamwork, a discipline, a level of commitment. And I think it's as important as what happens in the classroom are the things that we support around the classroom. And this is just a good example of that, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
So we are excited about what the spring will bring as well. The next thing in my packet was just to kind of go over the budget presentation calendar with you all. So usually this is the meeting where we're talking about maintenance of effort, but we've already done
We've done
that.
that, right.
There is no new information to share as far as maintenance of effort. That won't come out until the latter part of January. So we'll start our department budget presentations with the first meeting in February. We'll do elementary and secondary budgets. Then we'll do teaching and learning, student services, arts, technologies, facilities, and athletics. Those are the ones that we have traditionally always done. I wasn't sure if there was anything else you all were interested in seeing over the course of February and March.
Aaron, I'm not sure it's the appropriate time, but I think we're gonna see some change in the legislature. We usually bring in Representative Cutler, drawing a blank on the woman who's
Moran.
Representative Lenatra.
Yep.
But I believe Senator Moran is not up for reelection.
She's not.
She's
She's
gonna-
not running.
Yeah, so I don't know, I think we get the House side of budget and whatever, but I hopefully
Yeah.
she would come if we still invite her. I mean,
I think she
There's,
would, she indicated.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'd be
That's-
surprised if she didn't.
Yeah, I would hope she would, but that would be a bit of a wrinkle for us.
Yeah, when do
She-
you want to target having them in?
When would be a good time? I mean, right now, everything's already done, so it would really be for next year, right?
Right, it would be for fiscal year '25.
So, does it make sense, I don't want to do it when it's like really busy here, like March maybe?
Okay.
I do think the one thing to think about, right, is the governor's budget will come out in January, right? They likely won't even have a budget by the time we go to town meeting. But I think any early indicators that we can get from them, so if it's March, I would do early March, so that we have enough time to plan and react. So if the legislative team comes back and says, hey, I know the governor's budget said local aid was going up 3%, that might be, and we could still get a big fat zero, right? So I think getting our elected representatives, but not just on the record, but also tell us what you think is going to happen so we can plan for it, I think will be helpful.
Yeah, so early March, the first week in March we'll do.
Yeah.
Is in there, the technology, are we on a cycle for replacing Chromebooks?
Yep, yep. But Brandon will present that as part of his presentation.
So last year, when they were here to talk about budget, we heard that there was money everywhere, and the state was looking to give money away, basically. And I'm seeing every suburban town school system is broke, practically. I don't know, what did they do with the money? I mean, it's, that, I mean, I don't know if that's a question that's right, that we'd ask them, but I mean, how can we move that? You know, I don't know, it's, how can we move the needle to get a little bit more support possibly?
Right, and I think what we've seen, I can speak for myself, Mary Beth and Jess, is, you know, an influx of one-time money. So,
Right.
you know, they funded the Acceleration Academies, again, for the vacation weeks. We talked a little bit here about the one-time funds associated with the Department of Public Health grant. That doesn't fundamentally fix the issues with the Chapter 70 formula. It gives you like a good one shot to do something new and different, but it doesn't fix the inherent issues that we have with the way the formula is currently working.
And the tough thing with the formula is it's skewed to serve really the towns or cities with the most students. So it's funny, it's hard to say that's wrong to do, but they're leaving out a good chunk of the state when they do it that way.
So I
You
can
know what I
say,
mean?
I would be very comfortable saying it's wrong to do it, right, in the way that they do it, and I don't want to be confrontational about it, but I think there's two components as far as where state funding's been over the last couple of years, and some of it in what I do for a living, I've been living, right? There was so much federal one-time ARPA money, which, by the way, a little editorialize, it's about $33 trillion in debt. But there was so much federal ARPA money that came in to the system that what you were talking about, Mike, you're right? It's like, and it had to be spent by a specific time.
Right.
Or it had to be returned to the federal government. So the Commonwealth, rightfully so, said, well, let's spend it and get some good out of it for our residents, our citizens, our kids, our, name the thing. But it's gone, right? And that money dried up, and that money is now coming back into the system. And at the same time, there were a bunch of announcements over the last few months about tax revenues being short, capital gains revenues being short, you know, because economically things have slowed down, and, you know, inflation's eating things up, and you're not getting the gains with investments and everything else. And as a result of those dollars being lower, you know, things are beginning to tighten and pull back. The Chapter 70 funding, for 15 years, we've been asking our representatives to make inroads and make changes in the Chapter 70 funding. Because it's not about how many kids either, it's disproportionate, right? If they gave every kid in the Commonwealth X amount of dollars per child, that would be one thing, right? But the Commonwealth is trying, this is my opinion solely, this is not fact. They are trying to engineer an outcome by making certain areas and localities within the Commonwealth preferential, and other areas are basically getting less as a result of that. And there's a million reasons and there's a million pieces of spin, and it goes long before anything over the last couple of years. This is going back decades. The reality, though, is that suburban school districts like Pembroke, right? So you're not talking about Weston, you're not talking about Wellesley, you're not talking about Newton, you're talking about places like Pembroke with regular people, mom and dad both work, doing the best that they can, get hammered, right? Whereas you have Boston, I'll never forget coming to a school committee meeting 3 or 4 years ago, 6 or 7 years ago, I guess now, where Boston said, no, it's no big deal, we're gonna increase the size of the school day, and it's gonna be $15 million, no big, it's a little bit of money,
Their budget
right?
this year, I've read, is either, in the Globe, has stated it's either 1.7 billion, 2.7
That's right.
billion.
That's exactly right.
And 3 billion, I've heard, as different numbers for their budget this year.
And we're begging for $25,000 or $50,000.
Yeah.
So the formula is awful, and the formula is completely unfair, and it has been. The reality is, there is not enough political capital with your suburban representatives that could change that or shift that, because the number of representatives
There's
in the
less.
House is based on population, and that's where it's gonna go. So we can talk a lot about it, it's not gonna, we're gonna be still left holding the same issues back is if we just move on, I guess is probably the best way to put it.
Right, and there's a couple of places where the expense has vastly outgrown the formula, right? And so one of those areas is the cost of special education, and the
100%.
other one is healthcare. And so the last time.
Transportation.
Yeah, the last time they made adjustments to the formula, though, we didn't see, I think that's the year that we got $100 a student. We did see more than we normally saw. It still wasn't huge gains for us, was the year that they adjusted that. I would assume that we would see some sort of adjustment on the special education side moving forward, only because of that huge increase that we talked about with the Operational Services Division and the 14% increase in tuition. So they passed a $75 million in supplemental aid for districts that met this ridiculous threshold for that increase in special education tuition. We don't meet the threshold, but there's got to be some kind of accounting for that moving into the next year.
But I do think when our representatives come, and this is where the tables turn a little bit. And we should always be professional, and we should always be respectful, and they work really hard, I'm sure of it, right? But we need to ask them those questions, right? We need to put some of those questions before our representatives and say, you represent us, right? Or you may represent Hanson, or you may represent Marshfield, or whatever area makes up your district. We need help, right? And how are you getting it for us, right? And it can be uncomfortable, but to a certain extent, that's our job. And part of what I'm saying is we're gonna ask those questions, right? We're not trying to gotcha anybody. We're not trying to make anybody look bad. I think knowing that those are gonna be the questions, or at least some of the questions I'm gonna ask all of the representatives, I think it's good to come prepared, and not about at the state level we've done this. I wanna know at the Pembroke level what we've done, and
And so-
those are different.
So one of the things I'm going to suggest is that everybody sort of write down some proposed questions and that we give it to them ahead of time, because what I do know is that Josh Cutler and Kathleen Linatra are not on any sort of an education committee. So they don't really even have, I mean, they vote on it, of course, but they don't have as much influence, I don't think, or, they don't, it's not that what they
They
care
don't have as
most
much
about.
information as someone
Yeah,
that would be on one of
exactly.
those committees.
It's
right?
not at their fingertips, and so if we are proactive and we send over a list of questions, I think that would be helpful, and they can be pointed questions, but hopefully we can get some answers if we give them the pointed questions ahead of time.
I think that's fine. I mean,
That
I
makes
think
sense to me.
anything that can make that
Yeah.
a productive conversation, because what you hope for are strategies to get us maybe, a little bit of money
Right.
for whatever it is. Now, what Vinny DiMacedo used to say regularly when he would come is, tell me something tangible that I can help fund, or that we can help go get money for, right? I think that's the other thing, is we should think about a couple
We
of
might
those
be able to
things.
think of one or two things.
Yeah, I think we can come up with, but really, let's
I'm
think
sure we
of.
can come up with a few. But
Yeah. And I'm grateful that we have a team here in Pembroke that often goes after these one-time funds and
Yeah.
is skilled at going after the funds and, gets them
And was smart with the
regularly.
ARPA money.
Yeah.
I'll say, a lot of that was before I came on, but, a lot of towns are struggling because they use that money not in the most intelligent way, let's say, and, to start new programs that now they can't fund
Right.
because they got that one-time money and they don't have anything to, so I think everyone here deserves credit for, really planning
Absolutely.
ahead and using the money wisely.
Absolutely. So,
We still have some left to use, so it goes through September of 2024.
Yeah.
so.
all right, well, that's good. All right, so on to the subcommittee liaison updates. So we'll start with.
Yep, so Ed Sub met what feels like a lifetime ago, but was only a couple weeks, right? And we talked about the changes to the program of studies. I'm going to hand it over to Mary Beth in a second, but there's a couple of pieces to what we went through. So there's obviously each year we have some new course proposals that Mary Beth will go over with you all. Again, this is just us asking for your blessing to put them in the program of studies. We obviously only run courses that students select. So if students don't select the courses, then we're not looking to run them. The next piece is some updates to the pathways kind of map that we've shared with you in the past. That is printed in the program of studies, and we've heard feedback from you all and from families around, some improvements that you'd all like to see there. So I think we captured most of that in there. And then there are a couple of sweeping changes we would just like to make, so we'll go over those as well.
I think we should start with the new course proposals. Those are the easiest to
You
wrap
gotta
our-
speak up.
Easiest to wrap our brains around. Sorry about that. You can see on the cover sheet that I gave you guys that has the red in it. I think you can find that. That's probably the easiest place to follow along. And on the back side of that first sheet has the new course proposals. There is a detailed course proposal in your packet as well. So there's both ways for you to look at it. We're proposing the next two courses for the pathways in engineering and the pathways in biomedical science. So our first two proposals are to bring in principles of engineering, which is the second course in the sequence, and human body systems, which is the second course in the biomed sequence. I don't know if anyone has any questions about those particular things, but they fit the pathway. They are prescribed by Project Lead the Way. They do require training for teachers. They will require some purchase of materials. We do have some grant funding for that as well, so we can offset some of those costs through the grants.
So I just had a couple of questions. This is probably just, maybe you can just explain it. I was looking at the human body systems course, the frameworks, and I'm just trying to understand, and when we're talking about the human body, and it's talking about analyze a major global challenge to specify a design problem that can be improved. How does that relate to, I don't know, how does it relate to human body
Do you
systems?
want to go?
You can go, it's fine.
There's a very simple example that we've seen at the 8th grade, and then they extrapolate that in the upper grades. So in the 8th grade, they design somebody for a student who has cerebral palsy, for example. So you're looking at human body systems and how you can augment performance or how you can support performance that needs, that needs something extra. So it's those kinds of things, but it's far more chemical by the time they're getting to this course, which is the second in the sequence. So it's more of a chemistry-based course and biology-based course than just, hey, here's some paper and tape, what would you do with this? So now they're going to go a little bit deeper and talk about maybe implants or maybe other kinds of human body systems and how engineering can support that. So it kind of mixes a little bit with the engineering curriculum as well at times.
Oh, okay.
Right, so when we had the 8th grade, the woman that taught the course at the time, and we had students come, they were designing a prosthetic for somebody with a drop foot related to cerebral palsy. So, just moving that up a few years,
Yeah.
that's.
Okay.
And that would be the same thing on the next one, right, where it talks about complex real-world problems. So everything, I think, and I had a similar question, actually, so I'm glad you asked it, right? Everything ranges back to the human body, right? This isn't going to be, we're going to talk about climate change for 5 weeks in a human body type of course,
Oh, no,
right? This is
no.
it's about the body, the way the body functions.
It's more
those
medically
types of
based,
things. Medically
actually.
based, yeah.
So I think it's more like, it's biological.
I get
So,
that-
yeah.
that's
So
what I
that's
was
where
trying- that's better way
they're
to put it.
sticking to the science, but obviously science interacts with the real world. So I'm just reminded that I just saw Oppenheimer. So just some of those ethical questions, this came up before in our Ed Sub meeting too. What are the moral dilemmas? Now,
Yep.
these courses are not, designed to create nuclear energy
Yeah.
necessarily, but those kinds of, if you can make it, should you still make it even
Yeah,
though you
I
can
got
make
it.
it?
Yeah,
So
got
those
it.
are the kinds of things that we're asking kids to grapple with on a very small level.
And it's
at this-
critical
this
thinking,
age.
right, ultimately,
Yeah.
that you're getting to, that's a good
Yes,
thing.
and what's the potential? And the most obvious one right now is AI, right? So
100%.
if you have it, how can you use it? How can you use it responsibly? How do we integrate it? Because it's not going anywhere. So how are we going to use it in a way that's ethical?
I did not remove human interaction just because you have it, right?
Right.
Yeah. Yep, that's great.
And then the other question I had
Sure.
was, how do you pick the curriculum that goes along with this? And did you pick a curriculum
So
yet
For Project Lead the Way?
for this particular course?
for principles of engineering, that
Yeah.
comes straight from Project Lead the Way. So
Okay.
Project Lead the Way is a well-respected national science organization that focuses on higher level thinking for students, and their approach is very project-based. And they also want to be inclusive of, you know, all learners. They don't want just an honors program for kids that are going to MIT or to a high-level engineering school. They want all kids to be exposed to these principles and concepts because they feel that it's so important. It's an excellent organization. They're who we get our grant money from as well. But it's tied to the Massachusetts frameworks. So they use the frameworks to develop the curriculum that then they teach our teachers how to explain to students. Their pedagogy is where most pedagogy is going today in terms of education, which is more about give kids a problem, how do they solve it, instead of watch me do the problem, now you do the problem, now, you know. So it's more about here's the issue, what do you know already, and how can you get at the problem? What can you show us that you know? And then what can I, as the facilitator, coach, teacher, help you to move your thinking along? So it requires quite a bit of teacher training for that kind of classroom to run and to think, because it's a lot of project-based collaboration. So it's an excellent support network.
And so the professional development, is that part of the grant funding?
Yes.
So the money that
It's
is.
shared, so some of it is shared. So for example, the grant will pay for the course.
Okay.
The grant will help us with any travel associated with, for example, one of our teachers went to Indiana last year for training. It was only offered in 2 places in the country, and that was one of the places. So they'll help you with that. There are some things the grant won't pay. They won't pay for what we have to pay the teacher as a stipend, for example.
Okay.
But they share costs. They'll pay for supplies, durable supplies.
They will.
Not consumables, so.
Right, and we also got some capital money a couple of years back.
Right.
So we were able to purchase the bulk of the computer pieces associated with the engineering
Yeah, the
pathway through
hardware,
the
yeah.
capital
Yeah.
item.
But I do think that's an important distinction, because we just had a conversation about things are tight, things are difficult, and you look at the 2 courses, it's $100,000, right? But it's not $100,000 coming out of the
From us,
operating money.
right.
Correct.
It's a great use of one-time money, actually, because it's startup, it really is one-time expense,
Yes.
you know, to seed the course and the materials and whatever, so.
But at the same time, so we still have to fund 2 new teachers?
No.
Yeah,
Or, let's say.
So they have to go to training, in this particular case, now this could change year to year, but for this particular year, the 2 teachers that are currently teaching Project Lead the Way at the high school, the engineering and biomed, are open to taking the training for next year. So they would
Okay.
go next year.
So we wouldn't have to hire anybody for either of these courses?
We don't have to hire, we do have to train. They
Well,
do have,
train,
they do
yeah.
have to take the course, the Project Lead the Way course.
Right, and
which-
depending on student interest, it could mean that something else in the program of studies as far as an elective wouldn't run,
Right.
because more kids are interested in this
Okay.
than some other
Okay, so
random
it said,
elective.
will additional staff be needed, and it said yes, so that confused me. So what you're saying is we just haven't had someone sign on, but we do have the staff already?
Correct.
They just haven't taken the professional
They
development?
just have to do the professional development, right?
Okay, I was gonna say, because do we need to wait until we have our joint budgets to figure out how much money we're getting before we approve this, or?
No,
like,
so
what
you're just
happens if-
approving to put it in the program of studies, and, Mark will front load with the fact that when we have the program of studies night, we talk to families and students about, these are just everything that we offer. It may or may not run based off of budget and based off of student interest. so.
Okay, all right.
And
fair
this
enough.
year, we ran a lot of these courses. So we ran 4 biomedical classes at both the honors and CP level, and we ran 3 engineering classes at the honors and CP level. So we had actually a healthy number of seniors take advantage of those courses, which I think is great, because
I
it's
do
a
too.
great way for them to see, oh, is this something I want to pursue as a career option or as a college concentration? So I think that was great, but they'll fall off next year.
Okay.
So that the numbers of courses, I would anticipate probably won't, I don't know what the 8th graders are going to do, but it would probably pretty much be the same, probably 3 engineering courses and 4 biomed classes.
Okay,
So that piece of it might stay the same.
okay. So, I'm sorry, I sort of hogged this, Dave, do you have
Nope,
any
I'm
questions?
good, thank you.
Patrick, anything else?
No, I think having courses like this is incredibly important for our kids, right? For that exact reason. If nothing else, they're gaining exposure. So if I'm going to go to Wentworth for engineering and I can take this class and I at least get a foundational understanding where it's safe,
Yeah.
you know, and it's a controlled environment.
So true.
I'm not much farther ahead, no different than how our philosophy is everybody should be able to take an AP course. Because even if you take an AP course and get a D, you're so much better off, and your likelihood of success in college skyrockets, right? That's what these courses do for
Yeah,
our kids.
absolutely.
I agree. So those are the two courses that are associated with the pathways right now. The next course that we are proposing is AP World History. This is a class that would ideally be for 10th grade students, and it would be an option for students who are, you know, love history, want to continue on a more in-depth level. They would go from World History 1 to AP World History. AP World History covers, it's a survey course, also covers the material that they would generally take in US 1. These students, a lot of these AP World History students would then move into AP US History in their junior year. So that material gets covered actually again. So I think, you know, at first glance, one thing might be like, well, what about US 1? US 1 is covered here, and then US 1 gets covered again, actually, in AP US 2, because that test encompasses both of those periods. So I think it would be a great opportunity for some of our 10th graders who want to challenge themselves to move in that direction.
Didn't we have this at one point?
We talked about adding AP Human Geography, which ended up not being something very viable. They were trying to offer that at the 9th grade level.
Yeah.
Some schools picked it up, not a lot of schools stuck with it. Then they developed this course, which we're starting to see become more popular on the South Shore. And the pathway that they're recommending is 10th grade is a good time for students to
Yeah.
give it a try. 9th grade's tough to put a student into an AP class.
They've never done it. Right.
No, we haven't generally had one in the 9th grade. I mean, we have obviously some math students that are light years ahead of the rest of us, but I don't even think they were hitting AP at 9th grade, yeah.
Do we have to approve these? Or
This
it
is just a first read for you guys, so you're going to take them, when she's done with the last new course proposal, you're going to take them as a first read, and we'll bring them back the
Right.
next time.
Thanks.
And then the final class that we're proposing is an AP Spanish Literature and Culture class. Right now, we teach an AP Spanish Language and Culture class. This is an alternate. We have a couple of juniors this year, I think about 5 or 6, Mark knows probably better. But we have a group of juniors that are completing the AP Spanish Language class. They've accelerated on their own time over their high school career. And there is some interest in this. This, again, would only run if there are enough students to run it. But we are exploring, maybe there's a group of kids that would want to take this one year and take the language one the next year. Maybe we flip-flop them. We'll see. But I think that there's enough interest, and we have a teacher that's interested in teaching it. I think it would be something that would be worth seeing if we have enough students to run a class like that.
Have you thought about what your base number would be? Because with some of these, like, I remember my kids were in AP French, 2 of them. I had 5 kids in the class.
Right.
I'm thrilled they got the opportunity to do it. Some of the AP courses we're willing to run with a smaller number of kids. I mean, have we thought about?
This would
what that
be a little bit different. I'd be looking for probably between 10 and 15 for
Okay,
something like this,
all right.
because if we're offering AP Spanish language
Yeah.
also, we're offering an AP track for Spanish-speaking students. This is also.
It's more about culture. and,
Correct.
and
Well, you have to
literature.
read text in the
Yeah.
language, so
Yeah.
it's incredibly demanding. It's a great course. It might be something that students could choose to do as an independent study if it doesn't,
I got it. Okay.
you know, but there's no way for us to really know how much interest is there unless it's sort of in a program of studies and people are making a commitment to it. So we can hear a lot of feedback through surveys, but until they're actually filling out that form, it's hard for us to know what students want. And I do feel that, hearing the voice of the students has been super helpful in a lot of the courses that we've offered. That engineering and biomed are prime examples. When we started that process, which now seems like 100 years ago, but about 5 years ago when we surveyed students, the number 2 picks were those courses, and lo and behold, right away, we had, like 90 kids take biomed and 68 kids take engineering. That's a significant number for our population to be selecting, so.
We were worried that no one was going to sign up for those when we first put them in the program of studies. We were worried about them when we added it, and so seeing that now
Yeah.
shows you.
Yeah. So those are the new courses that we've proposed so far, so. I
Do you
don't
want to
know.
just take them as a first read, so then we
Sure.
can check
We
that
did
box?
question first.
No.
So So move to accept the
Four.
four courses,
Four.
sorry. Four courses as presented as a first read.
Is there a second?
So moved. Oh,
It's moved and seconded.
Second.
And any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And it's unanimous.
The second thing in your package that I think would be the best next place to land is the pathways. So if you can take a look at the pathways, we start with the biomedical science pathway, looks like this. Mary Ellen Gates, who is our coordinator for the pathways, has spent quite a bit of time making these consistent, making sure they line up, making sure that we are offering a number of different things for our students who are taking, especially biomedical and the engineering, because those are such defined courses that students have to take in order to complete the program. So the first few are just edits, and they're very much, some of them is grammar, some of it's spelling. It's really not hugely significant. We do see the addition of world language in all of these pathways in order to recognize how important it is for our students to be thinking about speaking another language and wanting to encourage them to continue at that level. The newer pathways that we're proposing is one for information technology. That's the last one, I think, in your packet there. Information technology, we are hoping to appeal. We do have a group of students right now who are on track to accomplish something like this, but this would be for students who are interested in computer work. They're interested in help desk kind of things. They're interested in hardware. They're interested in a lot of aspects of the computer science pathway, but they may not want to do coding. They may not want to do the programming part of the AP courses that we offer. This offers them another path that they can take in order to achieve that skill set so that when they are leaving high school, again, they have options. There are ways for them to use those skills either in a career or in a college setting. So information technology was something that we, as a group, felt was really important to offer to our students. The global citizenship and learning pathway, really what that pathway does is acknowledge the students that we already have and the courses that we already have. For our students that are exploring international relations, languages, Model UN features heavily in that, diplomacy. We do have a number of students that are already doing this work, and the teachers in the humanities wanted to make sure that we are acknowledging that they are also on a pathway and that they are doing some rigorous work associated with that. And then the last pathway that we are included in here is a music pathway, which again is something that already, this is actually formalizing something that already exists. We have students that are already doing this, and we want to make sure that we, again, are celebrating those students and making sure that they, that their work is also acknowledged and that we give them, as part of the program, an opportunity for internships and the support of the school. These things have been happening anyways through senior project. In many cases, we have a lot of our music and art students tend to do a lot of student teaching in the spring with some of the teachers in the district in order to hone those skills if they're into the education piece of music or art. But there are lots of other companies and areas around here where our music department and art department have reached out to different people, and they are interested in partnering with us and having our students do things that are associated with maybe music business. That's another area that seems to be very appealing to kids, music and marketing. So there's lots of different avenues for all of these students to pursue. So we're excited about recognizing those students.
Do you have to matriculate on the pathway beginning in grade 9?
No. So because of how we started it, Patrick, we had students, we would do the same thing with these new pathways, take a look at who's there already.
Okay.
What do we need? Mary Ellen did an amazing job last year, met with each of the students, and would say, well, here you're at, I forget what it says for music, so 22 credits.
Yeah.
You're at 20 credits, you have 2 more to go.
Okay.
Like, here's what I would recommend that you do, here's how I can help you find an internship, what are you interested in doing? So she's been working one-on-one with students and made some great adjustments in terms of families can now see on Power School that their student is in a pathway, her name is listed, she's developing those relationships not just with families but with vendors and not vendors, companies and different people in the community.
So you want to take the edits to the pathways as a first read?
Is there a motion to take the 24-25 PHS Program of Study, oh no,
You're on the
sorry.
pathways, yep.
PH Program of Studies Pathways Revisions?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And the ayes have it.
Okay, the other topics are on the front of your page, and they start with the requirement for history. So if we are introducing a new AP course, our requirement for history would have to shift a little bit in our program of studies. So the proposal is that students must pass 3 years of history, including 1 year of United States history too. That would just give us the ability to count an AP world history towards a history requirement.
Oh, okay, I was gonna say, wait a second. Thank
US
you.
History 2 is junior.
Correct.
No, I think I know the answer, but I'm gonna ask a question anyway, because I'm a little jaded, right? I'm one of those parents from way back then whose daughter or child never had US history taught to them K through 12 because of you remember that group, right?
Yes.
The change that the Commonwealth had in their curriculum framework. If making this a requirement should be, we should never graduate a kid who has not had foundational US history.
100%
period, right?
agree with you.
I know you agree with that. Every kid has the opportunity to take and understand US history, is that
Yes.
correct?
Right, and a couple of things safeguard that right. So Mass General Law has also changed.
Yeah.
So in 8th grade, the class is a civics class. So it is an in-depth look at the Constitution and
No,
where the
that's
Constitution
great.
came from. And there's also a project required, and now they're introducing a test in 8th grade for our 8th graders because they should have 4 tests. But anyways, they are going to be taking a civics MCAS test as well as doing a project. That law also requires that our students do a civics project in the 11th grade. So even though they're taking AP US 2 or whatever level of US History 2 they're taking, they also have an opportunity to do a civics project at that time. So, yes,
I just
that's the short.
want to make sure.
Yes, we're not forgetting US history at all. How could you? Should I keep moving, or does anyone have any questions about that particular shift?
That's good.
Okay, so the second piece was brought to us by our guidance department, primarily because this is a movement that's happening in some other areas, and also because there's a little bit of confusion about GPAs. So every school has a GPA, call it a cocktail, right? So they all have their sort of mix about what goes into the GPA, which is great and very important. Ours happens to be weighted, and it has all of our classes in it, and that's great. What we know about college admissions is that when our students are applying to college, the colleges start pulling apart. They don't even, the kid's GPA, great, whatever, they start pulling it apart, and they give the kid a number based on what they believe the courses look like, the number of APs, the number of honors classes, what your school offers. So our guidance department has proposed that we add to Power School for families and students that we add an estimated college grade point average. This would only be an internal data point. This is something that would help families and students to understand better. For some of you who have gone through the years of Naviance, where kids would plug in their GPA and they could see who in the past 10 years from Pembroke did what and where do they line up. We have a different system now called SCORE, but it does the same thing. What this would do is the estimated college GPA basically pulls out, whether we agree with this or not, what they tend to do is pull out at the college level your phys ed grades, any business grades, any arts or music grades that are not AP weighted. They pull out some of those electives. So this estimated college GPA would be a different number than your PHS GPA. We're not proposing that we do anything else with that except for it to serve as an information point for families and students, so that if you happen to be a student who has a 4.5 GPA, but you have a number of electives that a college might not take into consideration, maybe your GPA is more like 3.8. This would give you a number that's a little bit a better point of information for you to be making applications to school. And again, it's an internal data point. We would be using our traditional PHS weighted grade point average for valedictorian, salutatorian, for NHS, for all of those things, because we believe as a school community that the arts are very important. Phys ed is very important. Our elective programs are important. We're not trying to diminish that. We just know from some feedback that it would be helpful to families and students if they knew a little bit better about what the colleges are doing with those grades.
Go
I
ahead, Mike.
I thought this was a really interesting idea when we talked about this at the education sub meeting, because, the PHS GPA is what's going to go on the transcripts. That's their official score that they graduate with. But it gives the student and the parents just a better ballpark figure of how a college is going to look at it. And who knows, down the road, you can possibly start fine-tuning it, and, as data gets better and better, you might be able to even fine-tune it towards specific colleges as opposed to a rough ballpark figure, so.
And I had an opportunity to have a conversation with our lead guidance counselor, and one of the things that she pointed out is that if the student is a business student or a music student, there's ways for them to inform that student as well. Then your PHS, number is probably a good number for you to use. That's an excellent point of information. But if you are going, to WPI maybe for math or engineering, you might want to see what your competition looks like in terms of whittling down that GPA to the number that the school is going to be looking at. And it's really, sometimes this is very frustrating, this work, because you hate to think that all we're doing is thinking about like the next level. But it's really important, especially with the cost of all of these applications and the cost of college. I think it's important for us to be
applications take, too.
Right, giving families as much information as we can, and this is something we can do. So I think that it's something that would be helpful to most people.
So I think it's a great idea, especially because a lot of people really don't understand how any of that works.
A lot of it seems random.
Yeah, and as when my oldest was going through all this, I didn't understand it. I was very confused by all of it, and I wasn't comparing the right numbers or whatever for whatever colleges.
Yep.
But I guess my question is how do we package this so parents understand it? Like, we understand it because we deal with it every day, right? But how are we packaging it on Power School so that parents understand the difference between the two GPAs?
Yeah, we can certainly communicate that. We could actually put some, we would go into the red line on the bottom. It explains it as well. It'd be in the program of studies. But if it requires, for example, Mark does parent nights and program of studies nights, there's lots of ways we can push that information out.
Yep.
Obviously, the best place, if somebody has a question, is to go to your guidance counselor or to reach out to the administrators at the high school. But I think overall, assuring people that it's an internal data point. It's not something that's going out to anyone. It's something for you to use and see what your GPA looks like when you pull out some of your electives.
Will it be on progress reports at all, or is this literally just on Power School? Like, what's the thought on that?
My thinking is it's a Power School tool, and it's really just for college applications. It's not a number that we'd be using for anything else. That was never the intent. The intent is really to give people more accurate information. And I don't work in the world of guidance, but that's something that's coming up. So it's something that I think, I think we'd be remiss not to be listening to the people that are hearing this feedback day in and day out.
I think the reality of what we're doing is you're providing the right data points to the folks that need it. Because the other thing that I can do is, if I'm let's say I'm ending my sophomore year, and I'm chugging around at like 3.9 or 4.1 or whatever, because I haven't taken all my APs yet, right? And I'm like, I'm rocking it, I'm killing it, and then I look at my core, I'll just call it core GPA for now, or my university GPA is a 3.2. I might make different decisions about the courses I elect my junior and senior year, right? To make me more competitive, to make sure that I can strive for success. So I think that's awesome. My only question, and you alluded to it, is there may be, but is there a formula somewhere? So it's formulaic and we take the subjectivity out of it? Or is it,
Yeah,
or
so-
they kind of do this, so we're going to do our best and sort of.
So a little bit of
consensus?
both. We know, for example, from talking to area schools, that most area schools remove phys ed, art, music, business courses. It gets a little tricky because every school district, for example, business could be under the math department, it could be under world language,
Yeah.
whatever. But those business courses themselves don't generally find their way into the estimated college GPA. Same thing with phys ed, for the most part. Now, that could be different. You might have a student that's trying to go to, I'm looking at David because I'm thinking of Springfield, but, you could have a student that's their passion, that's where they're going. That estimated GPA won't matter. That will be well respected and taken into account. So I think there is a formula that we would have to commit to, obviously. What that looks like for us, we have a little bit of flexibility with. But I think given the goal is to give kids as much information as possible before they leave here, we would try to be as selective as possible and pick some more brains in regards to the college admissions people, which Karen Goff, who's our lead counselor, has done, and there is a spreadsheet, and I think it just begs one more look between, Mark and myself and then the teaching and learning group. But overall, it's usually phys ed, art, music, business. And then some of your courses could go either way. Like there's a couple that financial literacy could be a math class, it could be a business class, so there's a couple like that you have to play with a
I
little bit.
think this is really important to hear from families. Having lived through the college process with 3 kids, it's more competitive today than it was just when my kids, the youngest ones, graduated from Pembroke in 2018. Every advantage and data point that you can give families is going to help them. And there is literally zero reason. The other thing too is you're saying your achievement is equal to the effort that you're ultimately putting in from both the way your university looks at it, but your overall achievement. And I think to your point, if you're going to go to Berkeley College of Music for music, well, Berkeley's going to actually weight your music courses much higher. In those unique circumstances, you're right. I mean, then you can take your total GPA
And that's
you're
an
good to
accurate,
go. But,
that's accurate to use.
Yeah, it's accurate to use, but I think it gives families the right data points, and I think it's a great thing to do.
On the bottom, sorry, I was kind of running out of room and having a moment, I guess, for the environment, but on the bottom here is, in red, is the information that would go into the program of studies. So there would be clarification, and we also wanted just to add what the Massachusetts Board of Higher Education, what they have identified as their minimum requirements. Guidance counselors go over this with students. I don't want you to think for 1 minute that this isn't something that kids don't know or families don't know, but we think we should have it in the
Right in
program.
front of you is different than being
Right.
told it
Yeah,
Absolutely.
in
so
September.
I think it bears repeating as many times as possible, because it is a very confusing process.
But we would rank salutatorian, valedictorian, maybe even get to a top 10, not that I'm biased, with the Pembroke
PHS,
GPA.
yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I think that's equally important. I really believe that we want to take the whole student into account when we're looking at that.
Anything official comes from the Pembroke GPA.
Correct.
The other number is really, I don't want to say an imaginary number, but it's just not an official number. It's just a guidance, a guide.
It's a
for-
tool. It's a
yeah.
tool for families to use if they're a little bit curious about how their student might stack up in a college environment. So, for example, you might have a ton of great electives, you're getting, very high grades in your electives, your GPA might be close to 5.0, but when you start to strip away some of that, maybe your GPA is closer to a 4. I don't know how that's mathematically possible, Erin would know better. But when you go to plug your numbers into SCORE or to Naviance, you're going to see a huge difference in regards to the data that you pull from that in terms of what's a reach school, what's a safety school, what are you right on target for. You're going to get different data, and it's
Yeah.
important to have both sets of the data, I think.
Yep,
So,
I agree.
yeah. Okay, moving right along. Oh, the next thing was just to add the verbiage in red to the program of studies, add the Massachusetts College acceptance information. Okay, one of the next things that we discussed in our teaching and learning and admin team with the high school group is eliminating directed study for grade 9 students. So right now, students have the ability to access extra help or study time during Titan time, Tuesday to Friday. They have an advisory on Mondays. And this, we're coming at this from a couple of different things. Once we started looking at other schools and what's been going on, now that we're a couple years away from the COVID, everybody's doing their own thing and marching to their own drummer, we're trying to, get back on track and see where people have shifted. And I did do a deep dive into the program of studies. You can take a look at this, of our local area schools as a comparison point and our DART schools. And if you recall, the DART schools are what the state identifies as our district-alike schools. And when you start to look at, what are people requiring for graduation, you can see a range. There's definitely a range here, and we fall somewhere in the middle of what we require. But one of my concerns is that our students, for a long time, there was a movement in the Commonwealth that there were no study halls, and that they've kind of crept back in the form of a directed study. And I just want to make sure our students are well aware of the fact that they have an opportunity to be fully loaded. I'm not in any way suggesting that we want kids so stressed out that they're, losing their minds over this, but I do think we have some room in our schedule for students to be taking some additional courses. We heard a lot of information from parents regarding the pathways in the spring, especially the 8th grade families, and there was some conflicts. Some of those students that had conflicts, they had room in their schedule. There were semester courses that they would have been able to enroll in should they wanted to, but they wanted to have a study. So it gets a little bit tricky on our side of the aisle in terms of trying to meet all of those, all of those desires, all of those concerns that families have. I think 9th graders would benefit from having a fully loaded schedule with a Titan time in the middle of the day. Having said that, I'm curious to hear what you think.
Right, before we flip to that, I just want to clarify. So what we're saying is that students would not be able to, incoming ninth graders would not be able to elect a study during course selection. We all understand that there are absolutely instances where a student in 9th grade may require a study hall, and that is something that would be worked out with the student, the family, and the guidance counselor. But not letting them just go in and pick it as an option during course registration. The other piece, as Mary Beth just alluded to, the information in red on the Mass Board of Higher Ed minimum requirements has a few requirements that we don't have at Pembroke High School, which includes a 2-year world language requirement. There's an arts requirement. We're kind of in the place where our enrollment is pretty flat. We continue to offer more and more courses to students at the high school. It would be great if we had a better understanding of what kids actually wanted to take, right? And so asking 9th graders to take a semester elective opposite PE instead of the study that 78 of them are taking right now helps us to understand what are the interests of students, right? Gwen will sit here when she does her budget presentation. We've heard in the past, she sees her numbers going down. This is an opportunity for kids to be exposed to arts, to get a semester of ceramics, to get a semester of piano lab. I do think we spend a tremendous amount of time building our program of studies. We want kids in classes. The option to just go in and take a directed study without any conversation, I think, is a disservice to students and families.
And it's a disservice if you think of the whole picture. If surrounding areas and our DART schools are requiring a world language, they're requiring an arts component to the education, we want to make sure that our students are competitive outside of Pembroke as well. Do they stack up? And, for some of our students, they would benefit from widening their horizons and having an opportunity to take some of those classes. We, I think, shy away as a group from saying you must do X, Y, and Z. I think that's a lot of, families need to be a part of that conversation, students, to Erin's point. We need to figure out better where students would land if they had the opportunity to take a fully loaded schedule.
Right, so instead of coming to you and saying, we're recommending a semester of arts be a graduation requirement or a 2-year world language requirement, we'd rather see where students pick on their own first.
Yeah, I feel like I don't think my daughter would like it because she likes to have a study. However, I think it is a good idea that all students are exposed to some sort of an arts or, having more options available, like, it does make a more well-rounded student, in my opinion, if they're sort of like forced to like see what the art class is all about, or,
Right, and if you take a 6-hour and 40-minute school day and back out lunch, Titan time, and a study, you're talking about less than 5 hours of instructional time.
yeah.
Was that our intent when we lengthened the student day? I don't think so. I think the intent was to get them in class.
Yeah, if I could just say, I don't want to underestimate the role of Titan time in my thought around this, right? And I've come a complete 100 degrees on this topic, right? I was always a study hall guy. We all needed that study hall. But now that we have Titan time, our students have, if you take a full-year study hall, it's 55 minutes plus 40 minutes of Titan time. That's over 90 minutes a day where kids can get their work done. And what I said in Ed Sub was, both of those tools are really important if they use well, but because the kids have now more time, they're not using either one of them as effectively as they should. And I'm just basing that on my own observations, my anecdotal evidence. I'm in those classrooms every single day, and I see kids not using those times as I think they should. I think that there's a better use for their minds than what's happening right now with those things. Titan time is an important part of what our kids do, and they get a lot of that time to get their work done or to get support, and I think it's plentiful.
And I know during Ed Sub, I strongly objected to this. I am concerned about, is this like a transition? You guys gonna want to change this to 10th grade? Like, I'm worried about how far this is gonna.
Right, so we had originally talked about 9th and 10th grade, right? Ideally, 9th and 10th graders should be exposed to what we're offering at Pembroke High School. It's rare that a 14 or 15-year-old knows exactly what they want to be when they grow up. We all recognize that by the time you get to your junior year of high school, most of our students are carrying a pretty hefty course load with APs and whatnot. And that seems like the time where a student would naturally need more study time over the course of the day. The reason why we're not proposing 9th and 10th grade at the same time is that we're talking about putting, 108 students over the course of 2 semesters into something else with just the 9th grade. So we need to see what effect that has on the schedule. The goal of this was not to need to add staff. Keep in mind, when we give you the October 1 enrollment numbers, we always say there are some courses that are designed to run at 40. Those are directed studies, band, some of the PE courses. We don't want to be saying that this change now requires 10 additional staff members. We want to be able to use the places where we have some inefficiency in our schedule and we're running some pretty low section numbers to take advantage of that and see kind of where it leaves us.
Because I look at it as if we have 100 and some kids using a study, I would think it's because they need it, and also, the transition into freshman year, I think, is a pretty hard transition. At least it has been from talking to the family. So I don't like taking away the directed study. So I'll just.
Yeah, we did not offer 9th graders directed studies. I think 10 years ago it
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah,
part
we
of
did.
it.
Allison, can I ask you a question? I want to hear a little more about your concerns, because I'm trying to look at this from both sides of the equation.
So, at least from my personal observation, is a lot of them do it back to back with PE. So it's, they have PE, which is kind of that time to kind of not be as, to be active and,
Right,
whatnot.
physical, yeah.
And then reverse it with the next semester being the study. It kind of gives them, it's not that focused, your mind being on the whole time, type thing. And it gives, for some of the classes that do require a lot of, not a lot of homework, but, a decent amount of homework, it does lower that, because not that necessarily freshmen might not all work after school, but, you have the athletes, and we have, people that their after school hours are busy. We don't know what everybody's family life looks like. So this gives them that time, and I think it's utilized. And so if the problem is that they're not utilizing it well, then maybe we need to look at how directed study is
Right, and the argument you
implemented. I
just
don't know.
made is exactly the reason why we added Titan time. So if you go back to 6 or 7 years ago, when we added it, it was students are so busy outside of school, commitments, sports, jobs, families, we need to give them a time during the day where every student has, a dedicated 40 minutes to get work done, to seek out help from a teacher, because not everyone can stay after school. And I think, as Mark said, that has now had us all to start thinking differently about studies. Does it make sense to have both of those things in a schedule? You know, we've talked a lot about what a well-rounded student looks like. You know, I don't think it's the end of the world for a ninth grader to take a ceramics elective opposite PE. It's a different part of your brain than you're using for that versus geometry or honors US history, so.
All kids have Titan time, correct?
All kids have Titan time.
And the reason I ask is because when we put it in 6 or 7 years ago, it was a kind of a special help thing that you were put into Titan time in your schedule. It was
So
actually
everyone has
something that
Titan
was
time.
put in.
The way it works is that teachers can request specific students to come to them,
Correct.
or students can seek out the help that they believe they need. So some students are scheduled, and some students create their own schedule, but everybody has it every
So
day.
my question though, because you're making a really good point, Allison, that's why I'm not picking on you, I actually want to know more a little bit. If we have the time built in for the student automatically in the day to, whether it be, to your point, some kids just need to decompress a little bit, right? They need to shut off a little bit, time to do some work and that type of thing. Is that sufficient, or especially I'm thinking 9th grade, maybe 10th grade, is that sufficient for those kids and give them the opportunity to be exposed to something else, or are you concerned that's still not enough time?
So, I guess, I don't, I
And I
guess.
don't mean to leave
No,
that.
I guess I
wasn't
don't
really the
quite,
question.
so, meaning that you don't think Titan time, like, why do I think?
No, what I'm trying to figure out is, having the directed study
Mhm.
and Titan time, for half the year, you in essence have, call it 2 periods
Yeah.
of your day that isn't scheduled with a class, right? And what I'm trying to, the reason, I'm trying to pull this out a little bit to understand it better. Because we have Titan time and it's guaranteed, is the time that you're talking about kids needing to do
So I
work
think,
or whatever.
from my understanding of Titan time, is it's not always, there's time for the students, it's not their actual time, like they're having to, they're scheduled to go somewhere, and yes, they're, making up tests, or they're making up or getting help, or, and I think if my understanding is they do it on Mondays for the rest of the week, so they might need to, get help or whatever, so that time that they have a study is their time to either use it or not, like it's up to them, but it's time that they have to do homework or to study for the test, or, make notes, or, depending on if other students, I don't know, collaborate, but, it definitely should not be just free time running around in a library or something like that, and it should be utilized as well as possible, but I think also, as kids get older, they have to learn how to use their time, because, when you go into college or in the real world, like, you have to learn how to manage your time, and I think having it in as controlled environment as possible. And I don't know, I guess I just see the numbers like, is that like half the 8th grade, this 9th grade
Right, so there's
class?
76 ninth graders that have 1 semester of a study and 36 that have a full year of a
what
study. So that's
percentage?
112, that's more than 50% of the
So that's where I just feel like we're taking away a lot that these kids are, I don't know.
No, but you just, if I, just one more question, and I promise I'll stop, but you just said something that I hadn't thought of, right? So I guess my question, maybe Mark, is for you and Mary Beth, because one of the things you said, and I don't even know that you were saying it, is the kids who need help most are the ones that may benefit the most from having a directed study, because they're using Titan time to get the help, and then they can use the directed study to get some of the work done. Are you finding that, or is that, would that be a downside to do? Because that is sort of what I got from what you just said.
From my experience, I've only had, my daughter only taken 1 semester, and she was one of the freshmen that would have done that, flip-flop with the PE, but, when these kids, I don't know, I just feel like it's such a transition for kids into high school, that just taking away that, I don't know, I just feel like it's a large percentage. I just don't think people will be happy if we take it away, I guess. I really think parents and students are, I know the incoming freshmen wouldn't know any different not having it, but I just feel like it's.
Right, we don't have studies at our middle school. To your point of teaching students time management, the high school schedule is a rotate drop, right? So that's a whole,
Oh, yeah, that's a tough one.
the idea that you don't have math tomorrow is a very interesting concept for our 8th and 9th graders, or 8th going into 9th graders. So I do think some of that maturing is built in without having access to a study hall, but.
I think for Allison's point about the Titan time, one of the strong points that she makes, I think, is that the kids have to schedule, like, their Titan time is scheduled with their teachers. It's not scheduled to sit down and do work. It's scheduled to sit, like, you get a schedule on Monday, and you're meeting with, English one day, math another day, like, the teachers schedule you for it, and then you go. And so you're just you're concentrating on one subject whether you want to or not, because that's your scheduled time. Sometimes you need it, sometimes you don't, but it's not like you're sitting there doing work. Now, it's difficult because I also see the other side, because I would like to see more students take more electives in the younger years, because, like you said, to your point, it's very difficult to make a decision in ninth grade about what you want to do for the rest of your life. And so, like, to have, like, band, like, or a music class, or like an art class, or street law even, which I see is next on the thing to talk about. But I don't know, I just think it's a tough decision, because Titan time really isn't used as a study. On the flip side, I do know that my daughter, she didn't take one freshman, but sophomore year, she's taking a study, and she does go to the library an awful lot, so. I
Right,
don't
so
know what the point
those
of
are
that
all
is.
very good points. It's hard to
Yeah.
argue against all those points.
Right.
We're all on the same side of what's best for kids, you know what I
Right.
mean? But I just will say, though, that if a student is in good academic standing, and they have openings in their schedule, and by the way, most of the time, a student in good academic standing does have openings in the schedule, because
For Titan
teachers
time,
aren't
exactly.
claiming them. Yes, I'm sorry, yeah. They're in the cafeteria, treating it as a study hall. They're in the library, right? So our cafeteria, every Titan time, houses 75 kids every single day. The library, 55 kids every single day. And those kids are in there. Some of them are treating that as a study hall. Others are decompressing, talking with their friends. And we built it that way, for that reason, because I see value in that. I do, in the middle of a very busy day. What I've just learned is that, and prior to Titan time, and we didn't really have the population of study halls as we do now. I think about those days where it was very common for a student to not have a study hall, and we didn't have Titan. It wasn't a thing, Now I just feel as though we have gone in the other direction too far. I do feel as though the study hall population has grown a lot significantly, And to your point about, those classes where their brains aren't as strained, so to speak, in phys ed, in ceramics. I think it's, as we've already said around this table here, I think it's a great opportunity to funnel kids unwittingly into areas of study that they might not even have ever considered, and all of a sudden develop an interest in this. And now we have a much more well-rounded student, rather than a student who's sitting in a study hall for 55 minutes a day. I think that's the part I focus on.
Yeah, and
I get what you're saying, totally,
And I totally
Yeah.
appreciate and, want more kids taking, these, electives. And is there, I don't know, not compromise, but is there a way to make it where they have to be approved? Like, instead of having it where they can just check it off, then for freshmen, they have to have it, I don't know, approved is the right word, but, like, I know my daughter, she did not originally sign up for a study and then ended up changing, right around this time last year, so that she could have the study after her PE. So I don't know if there's just a way to make it so that freshmen, they have to ask for it rather than to be an option. I don't
Which
know,
is part of
just-
what we talked about, right?
Yeah,
Is that
like,
you
I-
just can't pick it, but there has to be an avenue for students that
That need it.
still feel as though they need it, and parents and families that support
just-
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like an override
Yeah.
or something. I think that's
Oh,
fair.
God, do not say that word.
I just don't know if there's a way to make it so it's not just eliminate directed study, make it be, I don't
So
know.
generally speaking, it's just kind of like, you need a teacher's recommendation in order to take an AP class, for example. Like, it should be something similar. Like,
And
you
I
need
don't know
a recommendation
if-
to
yeah.
take a study as a freshman.
Because how is it presented to the eighth graders? Like, when they're signing up for classes, like, can it just, what do they tell, I don't know.
So
like-
what we used to do is, it just isn't listed as an option for them, and so when the guidance staff go down to the eighth grade to talk to the students about course selection, they say that study hall isn't an option, but, if, between the, makeup of your teachers, your family, administration, there's obviously conversations that happen that students would, going into ninth grade, ended up
And we
with a study
still
hall.
end up with like 80 kids taking it.
I don't think you would, because just
No, but like
granted,
right now, like what do they, that's what I'm wondering,
So right now, it's just part of the
right now, when you
choice.
go in to
click
pick
it.
ceramics, you pick study hall
Okay,
instead.
so that's what I'm wondering, if there's a way to not eliminate it for ninth grade, but not make it as easy of an option, meaning like, like let the kids know that.
Well, what
it
we're
is
saying is
need
that
teacher
it
approval.
wouldn't be on the drop-down list of courses for you to select as a ninth grader, but we could explain
But-
during the process.
But could you just have it as as a course option, but have it be, you have to get a recommendation for it? Like,
I wouldn't, if you're gonna do.
We would have to decide what the criteria
Right,
is.
Well, that's what-
I
yeah.
think that's been harder. What do you think?
I'm kind of baffled by this, and I hate to say I'm probably the oldest guy on the board. I just remember a study when I was in high school. I don't think we could do it till our junior or senior year, and most of the people I knew basically sat there and read the paper and BS'd with a bunch of friends.
Yeah.
I don't recall one person
I don't
opening
read
a
the paper
book.
anymore.
He said he was the oldest guy.
Yeah, I said I'm the oldest guy here. I kind of see, Mark's point, we have Titan time, so there's X amount of minutes. And again, some of that is assigned, teachers, you want to make up work, you want to do whatever. But basically, to me, a study period when I was in high school was just a free period to sit on your tail and do absolutely nothing. And my thought is, we are an educational institution. Maybe I'm being a little tough on kids, but we're sending you to school to get an education, not to sit there and read the newspaper, not to sit and play on your phone, not to say, oh, I have to decompress. I mean, I get it. It's a different world. I don't want to sound, again, like I walked to school uphill both ways, but I did.
In the snow.
In the snow in my bare feet. No, but it's just, I think the time is there that they can use it. Everyone is busy. It was, again, a little bit different, but I just think building a study into a ninth grader or 10th grader is just a recipe for disaster. The 1 or 2 kids or maybe 10 kids that, let's say, need it. And again, I think maybe it's a case-by-case basis with Mr. Talbot. I almost sound crazy. I can't believe we're having this discussion. I think we should be encouraging kids to take classes, try things. Hey, if you take ceramics, you don't like it, what's your other option? Is there something else they can do? That's kind of my viewpoint. And again, no disrespect. I certainly hear what you're saying, Alice and Patrick. I hear what you guys are saying. But to me, I want the kids in school, in class, taking classes, not
Right, I think
just buying time.
Just sitting here listening to the back and forth, looking at kind of the list that Mary Beth compiled of what other people are requiring. We're one of the only schools on this list that offers a PE waiver for our student athletes. A lot of people don't offer that. So we're talking about a 10th grader that's playing cross-country, gets a waiver from taking PE because they're an athlete here, but then has a full year study in their
Yeah,
schedule.
it's-
Like,
it-
there's just...
Here's the thing that I think we really have to think about. I actually agree with you, by the way. But I think, first of all, I think it's important to make sure that all of our voices are heard as we have these discussions. But what struck me is when you said over 50% of the ninth grade class has a study. That's not the one-off or the handful of kids that for a variety of reasons may really need it. And to your point, it's going to get harder. It's not going to get easier. And I think because there's a built-in time in the middle of the day, and even if it's for someone with special help who's being directed, that's still a different time because honestly, it's what we all wish education could be. It's more one-on-one coaching. It's more one-on-one learning. There's still huge value that child that needs the help is getting, and they have dedicated time to make sure that they can get it and they don't have to stay after. Giving additional time out of the day where a child's not learning and school's going to get harder, no matter what pathway you're on, I almost think we might be doing a disservice to the child at that point. So I do think eliminating the directed study in ninth grade, I would do it for 10th grade also. It is appropriate. I will also say, for whatever it's worth, for years we didn't have this, right? And the kids really didn't have an issue. As a matter of fact, Titan time wasn't for every, that's why I asked the question.
Yep.
Titan time wasn't for every kid, it was only for kids. You were literally put in Titan time by a counselor in order to gain and get the extra help in certain areas, and you got it semester by semester, right? It wasn't a.
Right, those were we called it something different, right? That's
We did call it
enrichment
something different, but I
strategies,
don't
it's
remember.
that,
Yeah,
yeah.
There were strategies,
Yeah.
that's right.
Not
But
Titan.
I think, Allison, to your point, if there are kids that the guidance group, or Mark, maybe you and your team, really sort of say, hey, for a lot of reasons, giving this kid a study may be a good thing. I think that's where we have to rely on you all as professionals to be able to make that determination.
Yeah.
But pushing kids isn't bad.
No, it's not. And to your point, like my 3 sons that already graduated, I don't remember any of them having missed study hall, to be honest. None of them did. I'm pretty sure. They were too busy with,
I
but
do think when you get into 11th and 12th grade, when you have kids taking multiple AP classes
Yeah.
and what have you, I get why you would schedule.
well, actually, yeah, no,
I
Will had
get
it.
but-
Will had one, but he did his AP, his independent AP class. So, but other than that, like, I think
We're
that
not
we-
suggesting taking away senior studies, or
Right,
the senior
yeah, yeah.
privilege of coming late or leaving early when you have a study hall.
But before we finish this conversation, Mike, I didn't hear from you at all.
Yeah,
so
I've been
you-
trying, but it's been,
Patrick broke his microphone, he was talking so much. I just want to go on record saying that.
I agree with Mary Beth and Erin about, oh geez, I forgot now, it's been so long. But what Mark said about the kids being more efficient with their time, I do think if they have less free time or less time to devote to homework during the day, it sounds awful, but they're going to be more efficient with that time to get it done. I also think that, you know, like what Dave said, it's only going to get harder as it goes along. I mean, I breezed through freshman year in high school, then sophomore year like a slap in the face. So I think it's only going to get harder, and I think they got to get used to, I just think it's a better service for the kids to get them used to having to really budget their time and to take, oh, I know what I was going to say. The kids will have exposure to other classes that they wouldn't normally take. Like, sometimes you need that little nudge if it's required, you know, so I think that was a good idea as well. But I think the kids also have to be, you know, taught to budget their time better, and I think that's a good way to do it, I guess. So, you know, I'm not as much of a hard ass as Dave about it, but I agree with the sentiment, I guess.
Yeah.
So do we need a vote?
It's just a
Or
first
we're
read. These are
gonna
all
take
just
the
first reads and
reading back?
revisions, yeah.
So, we
There's
have
2
a-
more.
Oh, it's 2 more.
2 more
Let's keep going.
revisions, yep.
The next one is a request from Dr. Galligan in social studies for street law. Right now, street law is offered to students in grades 9 to 12. They're asking that they change it to 11 to 12. When we opened it up to 9 to 12, there were not a lot of elective offerings for 9th graders. We now have plenty of elective offerings for 9th graders. And because that course lends itself to some pretty sophisticated topics that are related to the Constitution, search and seizure, mock trials, they feel that sometimes the underclassmen don't get the full experience because they're in there with seniors and juniors who are pretty dominant and pretty involved. And they would just like to see that become 11th and 12th grade class so that all kids can get as much out of it as possible.
So I'm gonna say, I don't know if, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but that wasn't my experience with my kids, or specifically my daughter. But it was an excellent class
It's a
for her
great
to
class,
take in
yeah.
9th grade. She loved it, and she did extremely well. And I was grateful that she didn't take a directed study. She chose that instead, and
Yep.
you know, she wants to be an attorney, so like this was really exciting for her to take. And I would be really sad to see that half year, you know, it's like it's a half year
yeah.
class, so it's another option. It's a nice elective option for students, and I would hate to see it taken away from the younger grades. So, but I'm open to hearing what everyone else has to say. Mike?
We talked about this at the Ed Subcommittee meeting, and I actually agreed with you guys on that. I just think it is difficult for a 9th grader to speak up, I think, to speak up in a class of, you know, maybe 17-year-olds, maybe 18-year-olds.
Yeah, it's a widely popular class, so
It was her favorite class.
people love it. It's a great class. We could probably offer a full day of just street law if, if we didn't have to teach history and other things. But it is very popular. I think the teacher moved this forward, and with Mark's approval, basically because he just was a little worried, and, no disrespect to Taya, but maybe
Yeah.
not all kids are having that same positive
Yes.
experience.
No,
He's
I-
seeing that the older kids are dominating a little bit, and he just wants every kid to have that opportunity to, be the
Mary
lead
Beth.
attorney, be the judge, whatever.
Could we gear it back and have like a 9th and 10th grade level, an 11 and 12th grade level? Is that scheduling possible? I don't know, I'm just thinking.
Right, so again, it all kind of comes out in the wash with the schedule and the budget and everything else, and how many core history classes we have to teach. The electives come after the core courses.
Yeah.
As it is, I'm guessing, I didn't look at the street law numbers in particular tonight before I came here, but I'm sure it's heavily 11th and 12th grade, because everybody doesn't get it right away. So that was probably a bit of an anomaly that, that she was able to get it anyways, which sounds like it was a great fit for her, and we wouldn't want to, ruin that opportunity for kids. Just delaying it a little bit so that when kids are a little older when they're taking it. I think he also thought, like, sometimes the range of topics, 9th graders and 12th graders can be a little bit difficult to navigate. 12th graders come up with some pretty off-the-wall questions. A lot of search and seizure questions.
I'm sure there are. Can they fit it, if you only made it 11th and 12th, those years are already pretty packed, right? Can they fit it in their schedules if they all really want to take it?
I'm not sure how many people don't get it right now, but mostly our 11th and 12th graders do get it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the underclassmen that don't get it that often anyways.
Yep.
But it has not been restricted to them. It would just, again, to Erin's point, on the drop-down menu, when you go to select your classes as an 8th grader, it wouldn't be there. It wouldn't be there till you were in the 10th grade.
Is there any value, and I ask you guys as I guess the professionals, maybe not to make the dramatic change of saying going all the way to 11 and 12, but could you move it at least to 10th, right? And
Yeah,
see what, I don't know if you guys talked about
Comfortable with
that.
that, yeah.
Right, move it to 10th grade and, and then take it and then see, okay, how's it going?
Mm-hmm.
Evaluate it after a year, maybe come back and say, hey, this is working or it's not, but.
Sure. I mean, we're open to that. We, again, trying to maximize that opportunity for students. in
Yeah, I
the
think
class.
that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And to your point, if you're giving preference to 11th and 12th graders already, there's only so many slots left, right?
Exactly.
So,
Yeah, just numbers right now, as I look at Brian's 4 sections, Brian King's 4 sections, 28, 28, 25, 25, so it's over 100 kids in those 4 sections. There's 11 ninth graders total out of those 100 and something kids. 11 ninth graders are in there
how
total.
many 10th?
A little more as I'm looking at it, a little more.
What if you,
It's mostly upperclassmen.
this is just throwing something out there, but what if you did what you proposed, restricted to grades 11 to 12, and sort of like in college, if one class doesn't fill up, you could open it up to
In-
9th and 10th graders? Is that?
In reality, that's
rea-
kind of what's happening right now.
That's exactly what's
because
happening. That's how it works. That's how it
11th and
works.
12th
In every
graders
class,
get it
yeah.
first.
Yep.
Yep.
So the upperclassmen get it first, and then, as Mark was saying, there's 9 or 11 ninth graders, so there's not a lot. Over
So it's
4
even more
sections,
reason
there's
to
like
figure
2
out
in a
who
class.
wants it,
Yeah.
right?
Well, 3 per
Yeah, I
class.
think I like the idea of at least including 10th graders. I'd be more open, but Allison, what do you?
I don't have a strong opinion, I guess, either way. As long as it doesn't, taking away the class 8 for the level doesn't make it where it would get eliminated, or, like where they wouldn't fill it kind of thing, so,
So popular.
yeah.
We wouldn't do that to kids.
David?
No, I think my question was that, the idea of could we do a section of 11 and 12 and 9 and 10, it doesn't sound like it works that way, but, I'm open to pretty much anything on that one. Like Allison, I don't have a big stand either way.
So it sounds like go to 10 and see how it works and.
Right, so this is your first read, right?
Yeah.
or-
Yep.
Yep.
Mhm.
That could be the recommendation.
Change it to 10, 10, 11, and 12.
Okay.
Last one.
A class.
The last one is probably the most difficult one, and one that's very,
Yeah, this was heated.
well, it's complicated to talk about because, as a classically educated person, I do believe in Latin. Latin has its place, and it's a very, it's a very helpful structure and language to know. So, of course, whenever we're talking about cutting back on something, it's very difficult because we hate to do that. Programmatically, over the past few years, our student enrollment in Latin has declined, and I would be remiss to say that that is not also true in French. So both Latin and French have had a decline over the past few years. But at this point, our recommendation is that we begin to phase out Latin 3 and Latin 4, That would not apply to our students that are current ninth graders. They would continue all the way through with 4 years of Latin offered to them. But that starting next year, our eighth graders would be aware of the fact that Latin would be offered Latin 1 and Latin 2, which meets the requirements for the Mass Core as advised by the college system in Massachusetts for them to receive 2 years. It would not cut out the Latin electives, which are currently Latin for medical terminology and Latin for law and government. Those electives will stay as long as students choose to enroll in those electives. They are also based on student enrollment. But what we're seeing is less interest in the upper levels, and I think an emphasis or a recommendation from our group that going with the spoken language is something that's very valuable to students today. So that's our recommendation.
So this was the one that I almost didn't want to move out of sub, because I completely disagree. Like, numbers-wise, if you look at it, there are more kids taking Latin than French. I don't want to cut out either language. I think it's important, it's important to offer courses, so I think taking away, even if it is, small, it's still more than French. I don't know, I just have a real hard time. It was already taken out of the middle school. Taking the upper levels, I have a strong, I think it needs to be left into if the student enrollment completely disappears, that's one thing, but, the kids already aren't able to take the AP Latin because since it's not offered in the middle school anymore. But, if you look at, I have it on another sheet, but there was at least 20 or so more kids that take Latin than French right now. So I just disagree, I guess, a little bit with going by just straight numbers. But I guess if there are 56 kids taking Latin and 29 in French.
Right, but of the 56 taking Latin, 48 of them are in Latin 1, Latin 2, right? So there's 7 kids in Latin 3. There's 4 kids in Latin 4.
But the same can be said for
But
French.
that's not including honors, right?
Well-
It is, it's together.
But
So
that
Latin
should-
3
but
honors,
that's,
Latin
we can say
3.
the same, there's still.
Latin 3, 6, and then the Latin 3 honors, 24?
Nope, they're in the wrong year.
Oh, okay.
So,
Oh, okay. Got
I
it.
think, as a community, we phased Latin out of the middle school
Much to some objection, but.
6 years ago.
But was that budget related or was that it?
No, that was student enrollment related, which is the same place we're at now at the high school, right? Is that we're running really small courses in the world languages. If we set the threshold to, 10 students needed to be enrolled, we wouldn't be running any Latin. I just think that we are using resources for an area of study that students aren't necessarily selecting any longer. I do think, being a 3-language high school, and currently we are a 4-language high school, but being a 3-language high school is something that we are absolutely committed to. And that's why I think that the proposal isn't to phase out Latin entirely. We talked a lot at Ed Sub that some of our students with the language-based difficulties find themselves in Latin because it isn't a spoken language. We want to make sure there's still the opportunity for them to get 2 years of world language at the high school. That's why Latin 1, Latin 2 would remain, as well as the electives that we talked about. But it's just, in an efficiency-wise, can we continue to run courses that are this small? Is it the best use of our resources?
Can I ask-
Is there another language we should be looking at? We've talked a lot about American Sign Language. It's very difficult to find
But
an
that doesn't
instructor.
count for the college.
It doesn't,
correct?
but we don't have a world
No,
language
well, I know, but
requirement, right?
Colleges don't recognize
do not.
that. So
No.
That's the
But
downside of that.
Are we going toward requiring world language?
Well, so when we talked about requiring world language 5 years ago was the last time it was in Ed Sub, I think. We looked at the percentage of our students that were already taking 2 years worth of language, and then the kids that were left. And does creating a world language requirement, is that just creating a waiver system for the kids that are left because they would never be able to get 2 years of language depending upon some of the special education pieces associated with them as well as a whole host of other issues. At the time, it was 80% of students that were taking the 2 years. there's now 64% of high school students are enrolled in 2 years of language. I think that the kind of conversation that we had is this is a step towards that. We're not making the recommendation to change the graduation requirement at this time, but I could see that coming forward in subsequent years.
So, let me just ask, so if we are gonna move toward that direction, wouldn't it make sense to then keep maybe Latin 3 and 4, but combine them, like maybe make them honors classes only? Because honestly, if somebody's going into Latin 3, they're a lot more serious about Latin than, and then that way, maybe you'll combine the numbers and see what happens. We might have to.
That's what they do for at least Latin 2. It's a combo class.
Latin 3 is also a combo class.
It's already
But it's
combo
not
class.
2 and 3 or 3 and 4, they're separate.
They're separate.
CP
It's
and
just the honors
You
are
couldn't
in with
put
them.
Latin 3 and Latin 4 together.
Okay.
And
But
differentiate
But
that.
Latin 3 and Latin
Latin 3
CP and honors are
Correct.
together.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, what would it look like to keep it for another year? I'm just thinking around the idea of like us needing to eventually require 2 years of language. And wouldn't it be nice to keep that option for Latin available?
But that is available, so everybody starts Latin at the high school in Latin 1. You don't come out of the middle school with
that's true.
Latin.
That's a
So
good
to get
point.
2 years of Latin, all we would be offering is Latin 1, Latin 2.
I just think it's I am a proponent of teaching the classics. I think that, a lot of our languages, if you go off to college and you want to learn another language, if you've taken Latin, you've already, that it's such a base language.
We were
It
actually
helps
just
with so
talking
many
about this
things.
before the meeting, and just how pedagogy has changed just in English classes, and a lot of the roots of words and prefixes and suffixes. So much more of that is covered in ELA than ever was before. So that it's not eliminating it from the curriculum. but-
No, I understand that, but I do still think there's a need for it. Like, I still see students wanting to take it. I was actually one of the people who's really sad to see it leave the middle school, because I feel like it's such an important language. I think it's important for a lot of other reasons, and, again, like, I know it's covered in ELA, but it helps so much in college, and in college you can go learn a different language if you want, or you can continue on in Latin. Or you
Right,
can
and I
be
think
done.
that what's important to just point out is that the languages are just different than electives, right? Because if we had an elective that only had 7 students in it, we wouldn't run it. It's a year-long course. It's, 20% of a teacher's day is devoted to teaching 7 students. If you're talking about a 2-year language requirement, then anything beyond the 2 years would be an elective. And so our philosophy has always been, when we offer something, we offer the full gamut of it. It would, I think, beg the question of, then do we treat Latin as an elective? And if less than 6 kids enroll in, or whatever the number is, the magic number, enroll in Latin 3, then we don't run it. And maybe it doesn't run every year. Maybe it runs every other if there's a strong Latin 1 and Latin 2 number. I don't.
It's tough because, well, to Allison's point, French is the same issue. Like, there's.
Right, but we committed to French, right, in 7th grade. So we've committed to offering French and Spanish at the middle school. It'd be very difficult to offer French and Spanish at the middle school and offer Spanish and Latin at the high school.
So, but I remember when we eliminated it in middle school, I was against it. So
We were definitely against the French.
I was very much against eliminating the French also. I think this is sort of it's steps, right? So we eliminated Latin in middle school. Now we're talking about Latin 3 and 4. Next time we're going to talk about just eliminating Latin, right? And while I do think some things need to be student-driven and student-led, I also think, sort of as the adults, we have to be able to say, hey, this is important, right? This is important granted, pedagogy has changed. I mean, you've convinced me of that, I got it. But it's important for vocabulary, it's important for moving onward, it's important as you begin to grasp other languages, whether it be in university or somewhere else. If we're going to make language a requirement, I agree, I would not want to see Latin ever be completely taken out of the program of studies, because candidly, the kids that are really going to struggle speaking another language and going through it can actually learn another piece of history, can learn another piece of culture. There is a lot that you get exposed to. I think the ultimate question is a dead Romance language just as important as a spoken Romance language, is really what we're talking about here. Arabic aside, not a Romance language, but I think it's, at the end of the day, that's really what we're talking about. And yes, well, in some of the upper level Latin classes, the enrollment may be down. I've seen us run classes with 6 kids in it because it was an AP class and it was something that we committed to, with those kids, and we weren't just going to end or take that away. I think if you have Latin 1 and Latin 2 and then say that's as far as you're gonna go, I guarantee you in 3 years, we're gonna be, unless you make it a requirement, we're gonna be having the conversation of, well, no one's taking Latin 1 or Latin 2, because there's nowhere else for them.
Well, and
Ultimately,
looking
Right,
at
but I
go with
wonder
it.
if you do Latin 1 and Latin 2, and then say anything beyond Latin 2 is treated like an elective, right? So you as a committee are committing to Latin 1 and Latin 2 as the pipeline, but if there's 14 kids that want to move on to Latin 3, we still would list it in the program of studies, and if they select that, we would run it. But unlike the commitment to the full breadth of all the way through AP, we would treat Latin as an elective after Latin.
So let me ask you this question then. What if 8 kids want to take French 3? Are you gonna run it?
So French and Spanish are the language that we've committed from 7th grade through AP as a district. We don't have AP Latin anymore. We don't offer that because you can't physically get there because we don't have Latin 1 covered.
Remember, I made the argument.
One thing I look at, Patrick, is if you look at the pathways and electives that kids could take in pathways, in each of the pathways, one of the electives is a world language. Now, to me, that doesn't really make a ton of sense. Like, why does a kid who wants to be in the biomed field want to have to take a foreign language? It's because obviously in this world now, if a kid knows 2 languages or someone knows 2 languages, they're a lot more in demand. But if that second language is Latin, it's kind of, to me, it sort of defeats the purpose of that.
Well,
So
unless
say-
you're in the biomed field where the derivatives of Latin are all
Yeah, but they
over
have
the
classes
place.
for that, though. My wife is a lawyer, never took Latin.
But we also offer Latin for medical terminology and Latin for law, right? Which are-
Well, and also taking classes away, and I realize this would be not for the current high school students, but, if we want kids to have a good transcript full of classes, and they want to take, 4 years of a language, I don't know, because for instance, there's not, and I realize why, but we don't even teach French 1. We teach,
But we do.
in high school.
Oh.
In the high school.
We don't teach
It
French
depends on
one in the high
enrollment.
school?
There's no French
depends on
1
enrollment.
this year.
This year, we're not, right? that's
Yeah,
correct,
so if a kid so there is a Spanish 1 this year.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm just curious, if a kid, I don't know, there's
Right, so we do
there's
have
no
middle
con-
school students that aren't able to take a language in the middle school, which is
Yeah.
why 9th grade is their first opportunity. So in most years, there's a French 1, there just wasn't.
And I definitely don't like the idea of having, Latin be considered an elective, but the other one's not, enrollment-wise, so, I will vote no for
Yeah,
this
no,
one.
I just
I was
With
with
no
Latin 3 as an
just was
elective,
thinking
but
of ideas.
Patrick is right that it'll eventually just die out if it's an elective.
It will, I think, I don't agree about taking it out of the middle school either. I think we should have had it in the middle school, so I know it's hard, but I look at the result. The result is a lot of people, we don't have AP anymore, and a lot of kids are, it's dying out in 11th and 12th grade. The similar things happen with music. We took, we still have it, but, chorus at the middle school level is now out. She can only do it during Titan time, and interestingly enough, we don't have the numbers that we used to have. Enrollments come down too, so that's played a factor, but I
Right, as
feel like
much as
there's a
this is an
correlation.
education conversation, it has a budget piece to it. You just
I
can't
was gonna ask
continue
that.
to
Yeah.
offer the same number of courses with 300 less kids and not make any changes, right?
Right.
And that was the catalyst for the conversation at the middle school, was that the middle school enrollment was under 400 kids. It doesn't make sense to spread them out over 3 languages. What makes the most sense to put them in a pipeline?
And then what out of the languages, what languages provide the most value for kids going forward? I guess is what you got to think about. To me, I don't think Latin
But I don't-
provides the
I
most
think
I
value.
don't think that's for us, though. as
Right,
the-
I think
Yeah.
our students that are anxious about speaking in a world language absolutely find their way to Latin, and I think that we still need to have that for them. I don't foresee 2 years from now saying, let's eliminate Latin entirely, but you all are committed to being a 3-language high school. So coming back to you and saying, let's eliminate Latin entirely, your job is to say to me, then what are you proposing in its place, right? Because that's the education.
Then what are you proposing in this place? No.
Well, right now we have Arabic, but
I know.
keeping
But there's
Latin.
only one-
But keeping Latin 1 and 2 keeps that language in our high school, so we're still a 3-language high school. If we were gonna eliminate Latin entirely, then we would be coming to you with a proposal for Mandarin Chinese or German or something else.
I'd rather see us get rid of Arabic because it doesn't seem.
Arabic is
like-
gonna feed
Yeah.
itself out, so right now Arabic is just an elective,
And
right?
it's
There's a
one,
group-
and it's one level right now, right? We don't have, there's only Arabic 2 honors right now.
Right, so
So
there's
one
Arabic
sec,
1
so we have
and
7
Arabic 2
students
honors.
total taking Arabic right now.
Yes.
And
And there's
last
just
year,
one course,
and
it's
last year there
7.
was 9, so 2 kids dropped out. of-
Or moved, I mean, they
Yeah,
don't.
yeah, well, aren't taking it this year.
Because it's purely just an
Adding,
elective.
so just looking at the, like AP Latin and AP French, which I, Latin, there's 1 student taking it this year. But if you look at overall, we've had 23 kids taking AP French and 26 taking AP Latin. Like, the numbers, I mean, I realize this.
Can you say that again? What are those
So
numbers
I'm
again?
looking at the numbers, 20, if you don't include this year, because there's no AP Latin comparison.
She's saying from 2019 to
So
now.
based on the thing, there's 23 AP French kids from 19 to last year. And there's 20, in
more
that
than that.
same time period, there was 26 AP. Latin. I don't know, looking at the numbers, it
But
just
you
doesn't.
can't get to AP Latin with our current
Correct,
structure
which
now,
is
so I
wrong,
wouldn't
but
necessarily
no,
use
but
that
I know, but
as-
I'm just looking at like, when you look at, and there's, the years, we're missing a year of AP Spanish. You guys did we not run it 1 year?
No.
There's 28. So, I don't know, the numbers I feel like are there for Latin. I will not support taking it
Right, but
away.
just to clarify, we do not offer AP Latin.
No,
So
no, I understand.
comparing AP French
No,
to
I
AP
know, but
Latin to AP
I'm just
Spanish.
saying, like, even though it was taken out of the middle school, I think that might not have been the right decision, looking at what we have, like, the outcome of how many kids took AP classes. Like, and, now, this year, we have 1 who's doing it. I'm assuming that means they're taking it as a independent study, because I don't think we offer 1. So, I don't know,
They're taking it.
yeah, so looking at the numbers, I feel like the student, if we're looking at, they are low, but we don't require language. We are a small district to begin with. There's 100 and something, under 200 kids per grade level. Like, I mean, I do think the numbers are small, but that's just the reality of our district.
Brett, I don't think there's a lot of high schools the size of ours that are offering 3 languages.
David, I'd really like to hear your voice.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, I'm sitting here kind of beating my head against the wall. With total respect for all your opinions, the difference is every now and then you have to look at okay, we're the Pembroke School Committee. There are tough decisions to be made, and some of it is based on economics. We all have our personal feeling. We like Latin, we like French, we like whatever the thing is. If you honestly look at this, the numbers don't support it. It's not supporting Arabic, it's basically not supporting French, and it's basically not supporting Latin. Do we find a third thing, German, Italian, Mandarin, whatever it happens to be? I don't know. And again, that comes down to staffing and all that type of stuff. But I tell people, and I know it sounds crazy to use this kind of a simplification, in my business, if something doesn't move on the menu, you take it off the menu. No matter how much people, I love to have it. Every time I go in, I have it. The sales don't show it. You know what I'm saying? So then you sit there and say, what we do is we offer LTOs, limited time opportunities, and you put something out there and say, let's see if they like this. Let's see if they like that. And if people take the LTO, then you sit there and say, okay, we'll put that on the menu. Right now, and I use this as an oversimplification, we have failing menu items. 6 people are eating what's on the menu, or 5 people are eating what's on the menu. That does not work in a school of 400, 600, 800, middle school, high school. What we're doing isn't working. I understand Latin. I think it's fantastic. You learn the history of words and a lot of the history of language. But if you look at this honestly, take, your kid took this class or your kid took this class, sit back, pull yourself out and say, would you really teach a class for 4 or 5 kids? Is it economically a good decision for the people of Pembroke? Are we spending our money our best way? And again, you might be a little personal angry, but if you look at it and say, we have to do what's best, you know, for the citizens of Pembroke, for the kids in the school, for the administration, and make best use of their time. Teaching a class with 4 kids in it is not the best use of their time. And I think if you look at these numbers, they're going in the wrong direction. You know what I'm saying? So that's kind of how I would put it. And again, maybe it's an oversimplification, and I'm not trying to kill the messenger. And I think everybody makes very strong, valid arguments. And I think it's a great discussion. But I think if you look at, again, the economics of it, we're doing something wrong.
And just going by that, just to counter it a little bit, if you look at our Latin 1 numbers, they're going up. Latin 2,
Right, but they're going up with 9th graders. Those are our students that weren't able to take the language at the middle school.
Yeah. Again, I'll be honest with you, I would
Those
take,
ninth-
I would take Latin out, I would take French out. You know, have a backup game plan. What do we try? Again, Italian, German, Mandarin, you know, whatever, you know, language it happens to be.
Will that take
It
out
seems like
Arabic
works.
before I
Arabic
take
is
out
gonna
French?
take itself
Yeah, I think
out.
Arabic
So
was-
that's
again,
not gonna exist.
It'll-
It's an elective.
But
But
here's
we
the
also
thing.
made a conscious decision to move our world language content supervisor to the middle school to teach French, right? So those of you that have been tuned into this world language conversation for the past decade, it is staff and personality dependent. There was many years at the middle school where there was a rotating of who was teaching French, who was teaching
Yep.
Latin. It didn't get any momentum with kids. And so, you know, by moving Civis, taking probably, you know, our most valuable French teacher and putting him at the middle school to gain some excitement for taking French, I do think you're going to see a change in those numbers as you move forward. I think kids in the middle school are really enjoying French. And I do think you know, administratively, I want to give that a year or two to play itself out. I want to see how many 8th graders continue in French 2 next year.
You had a statistic, Aaron, that should worry all of us, right? And that was, I think, you know, 4 or 5, 6 years ago, the number of kids
80%
was
was
80%. Today, it was 64%.
Taking 2 years, right? So taking
Yep,
what would be the
that's fine,
requirement, which is
yep.
2 years, which you can get with Latin 1 and 2,
Yeah.
French 1 and 2.
But I think that in and of itself is really worrisome, right? I mean, we are in a more global community, and to your point, Mike, right, knowing a second language is incredibly important. Ironically, I actually thought teaching Arabic, I thought was pretty cutting edge, and especially in today's world, I don't think that's a bad thing at all. I think having a Chinese class, we talked about this years ago, could be really beneficial. I do, and I always have thought German was right, but I do think there is a dollars and cents component to this, right? We're gonna be talking about the budget, and it may be that we're not gonna have a choice, right? Because when we're making reduction discussions, a huge piece of that is enrollment-driven reductions that none of us want to get there, but we ultimately have to get there. I'm a champion of Latin myself, I've already said it, but I do think there is a dollars and cents component to this that we may be forced to consider. I also think we need to be very careful about limiting language options for kids, because I think it is critically important to preparing them to live in this world.
Well, at this point, it's like, I feel like we're really divided on this.
It's a
and-
first read, right? And so I'm happy to come back to you and share with you what area high schools are offering for languages. I think that would be helpful for you to see.
Yeah, I'd like to hear
I
some,
think I have-
some other languages
I
as well.
think, like, in a formal spreadsheet, I'll
I
include
know.
it.
I did do this.
I'd be interested in finding out, I know someone mentioned American Sign Language, and I'm sure trying to find someone to teach that's probably hard enough. But I'd be real interested, especially with everything going on now, that, you know, being proactive to some of these things. And it's funny, my daughter does it, and I would probably give her a B level in doing it. And the last 2 job opportunity things she had, people were fascinated that she was able to sign. They thought that was
My
amazing.
sister was able to take it in her high school, and I thought it
Yeah.
was
Yeah,
an
I-
awesome thing to be able to do. So I just,
I think it's a great idea too. I hope kids would take it
So
if we were to offer
I
it.
think they would take it. I think just to dose you with a little bit of reality, it's really hard to find a
Really
certified
hard.
teacher
Oh.
to do
Right,
that.
plus when
Yeah.
you're on a rotating drop schedule,
Yeah.
it doesn't, so.
And it doesn't.
It doesn't
meet
lend
your-
itself.
Right, in
Doesn't
Hanover,
meet a
they have
2-year
sign language, the
requirement
teacher
for the
teaches
college.
block
Right,
1
yeah.
only, right, just period 1,
I would
always,
love to
every
take
day.
it, so I'm huge.
But if
We've
it's
been
a
trying to
dollars
teach
and
my
cents
kids
thing, then
sign
why would we
language.
do that as opposed to Latin, which we already have, and it's not necessarily proving to be good? Like, I mean,
So, because I looked it up, so Duxbury does ASL, French, Spanish, Latin, Mandarin. Hanover does ASL, French, Spanish. Silver Lake does French, Spanish, Latin. Situate does French, Spanish, Mandarin / Chinese. So that's at least what I looked up, just.
Right, and we'll put
direct
together
neighbors.
that for you,
Yeah.
for you guys moving forward. Mandarin Chinese is a tough one. They don't recommend that you start that at the high school level.
They recommend you start at like in 5th grade,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah,
it's
which
pretty
is a whole
hard.
other conversation for a
And we,
different
ta-
day.
yeah, and we talked about that as part of
Yeah.
the budget process the past couple of years.
Yeah.
Is there some kind of world language orbit, for lack of a better word, that elementary students should be going through?
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
so these
that-
are first reads on top of anything else you suggested tonight. If you think of anything else of the data point that you'd like to see before you take it as a second read and either approve or disapprove of it, just let Mary Beth or I know and we'll pull the information together for you
Yeah.
guys.
So, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, so we have to move to accept the first read,
As a
right?
first read, yeah.
So do we accept it with changes, like we talked about changing the straight law to 10th grade as well, or? you know,
Yeah, you can, it will come back with the second read with the edits.
It'll come back regardless of how
Yeah,
we
that's the
vote
only
for it
edit
right
that
now.
you all need.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm happy to note that edit.
Okay.
10, got it.
Thank you.
So the second read will have some edits.
The second read
Street law
will
and
have
10th grade.
just the street
Just the
law
street
being
law.
grades 10 through 12.
And then we're going to look at other schools, and it doesn't mean it's
You
being
can
passed.
suggest edits at the
I
second
would,
read time.
I would just take that whole column out, or the whole line out for Latin.
I know.
That would be my suggestion for a.
After you guys research the, what the other schools are doing for languages, now, does that go back to education
No, it will
sub-meeting, or
come
would
to
it
you
come
as
back
part of
up
your
here?
packet
Okay.
as, for your second read.
And we'll have another robust conversation about whether or not we want to move it forward. But then I guess the question is, like, let's suppose we decide for one reason or another that we want to take that out and keep
You'll vote
Latin.
separately at each thing.
We're gonna, so,
Yeah.
we're gonna, we
Yeah.
don't have to vote on one
No,
document.
no,
Okay.
no.
All
This
right.
is just a summary of the changes. That's all.
Okay, all right, great. So, do we have a motion to approve this as a first read, the 24-25 PHS Program of Studies revisions?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, is there any discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, and the ayes have it.
Do we need the
Last-
new courses too, or is that
You
all
already
in
did that.
it?
We already did that.
Oh.
You did that first.
I
You
didn't-
received it?
No, it wasn't. It's been a long discussion.
This has been, yeah.
The
I just don't
last-
want to miss it.
The last thing in your packet is Section G. We are back to the sections from the policy manual. So it's Section G for the first read. Section G is personnel. I gave you just a summary sheet of our current policy manual and what the recommendations from policy sub were, and then the whole host of new policies that we are recommending again as a first read.
Can I ask about a suggestion on
Yes.
maybe adding a policy, since this is about personnel? And this is something policy sub would have to have a conversation about.
We're meeting on the 11th.
I'm not even sure, by the way, we can do this, so I'll just say that. But can we talk about a dress code for staff?
Sure, can you talk about it?
So that's not necessarily a policy. That's a change in working conditions that would have to be.
So is that
feedback
it, so
bargained.
that
Yeah.
would have to be bargained?
Yep.
So that's much more difficult to do.
But we do have some of our units are up for negotiation now, and our larger unit is up next year.
I just think stressing the professional nature of the environment and dress relates to that. Every business has something like that. I don't know that, well, I'll let it go there, because it would have to be a pat bargain, but.
All right, so does anybody have any questions about Section G?
Right, just a first read.
Is the first read? All right. Is there a motion to have this policy Section G, recode, revise, rescind as a first read?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, the ayes have it.
And then just check the mailbox, there's nothing in the SC info mailbox.
All right, no emails and
Meetings, we have.
future meetings. Let's talk about what dates we want to do for future meetings.
So I have the 16th on for this month. I shared that with PAC-TV. I know Sue had mentioned wanting to take a look at the comprehensive health frameworks. We had our PE teachers had an opportunity to take a look at that during the November PD day. So I'll put together an overview of any changes that they're recommending.
Okay. All right, that's great. So the 16th would be the next meeting. Does anybody have any conflicts? We good? And then, we'll go into February. Do we wanna, maybe we just hold off until then
Well, 'cause
and
we
figure
have,
out?
we'd have to look, because it's February vacation would be
Mhm.
the normal 3rd, so I don't know if we want to.
Yeah, do we wanna do like the 30th and the 13th or something? In order to, oh, I guess it wouldn't matter. Well, we could do, the 6th and this the 27th.
So we're gonna meet January 16th, and that's it for January. So what if we meet February 6th and the 27th?
Yeah, we could do that.
Scheduling with some of these Cub Scouts and Girl Scout troops would be helpful to kind of have
Yeah,
a
absolutely.
couple. So we're looking at, so
Does anybody have any conflicts with those dates?
Just, if you're gonna do that, why don't you tell me what you're thinking about for March, because if I'm gonna reach out to the representatives, I wanna be able to tell you the March meeting dates. So if you're meeting on the 27th, are you suggesting that you meet again on March 5th, 1 week later?
So
Well,
would we want to
we-
instead do January 30th and the 13th? Instead,
that's-
and then that would, then it would still be 3 weeks instead of it being 1
That's
week?
that's an option too. That was
I
one of
don't
the
know.
things I was suggesting. I don't know, like we have, the policy, and not, we have like, what do you call it? The budget, joint budget sub coming up. So we will have some updates on that. I just don't know if these meetings are gonna get overcrowded with topics, so.
I think though, just the way our schedule works, the 30th and the 13th probably made the most sense.
Yeah. let's-
And then we
let's do
would go
that.
back
So-
to the first Tuesday in
So
March.
Yeah, I think
so
that's
do
smart.
116,
January 16th.
130.
16th, 30th,
30th,
and then the
Mhm.
13th of February.
and then the 27th.
Possibly let's.
Oh, no, just the
No.
13th.
Let's stop at the 13th.
And
If we
then-
need to do the
and then it would
27th,
probably
then we
be
can
Mar-
add
And then
it
would
then.
probably be, then,
And then
now
you-
there's no school March 5th, because is that Super Tuesday?
Oh, the 16th, I do have something.
You do.
Yes.
January 16th?
Yeah, I could, if we could start it maybe a half an hour later, I could do the 16th. If we start at 6:30.
Actually better for me, so I'm all in on that.
Otherwise,
How
I
does everybody
can't.
feel about doing it at 6:30 instead of 6 on the 16th?
That's fine.
I'm okay with it if everybody else
Yep.
is. You're okay with it, Erin?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. You good?
So Tuesday, February 6th is out.
So what I have is 116 and 130, then you have one meeting in February, which is 213, and then you'd go back to the 1st and the 3rd in March, which is I want to be able to give the representative
And
date, so that would
does
be
it
the
matter
5th
that
and the
that's-
19th. It
Yes.
doesn't matter that there is
Oh,
at school.
okay.
It's a professional
So the
development.
5th and the 19th.
The 5th and the 19th in March?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And no February 27th.
We
right?
can leave it out for now and
That's a maybe.
add it in if we need to, but I don't, we may not need it. Does that work?
Mhm.
Is 1 February, we think February, just 1 is probably potentially,
Yeah, we got February vacation week
Yeah.
and, you know.
yeah. Okay.
So, all right. And are there anything else? We good? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, the ayes have it.